Imagine a maze of empty rooms, harsh fluorescent light, sickly yellow wallpaper, and a labyrinth of sterile, repetitive office corridors. This is the internet phenomenon known as the backrooms. We are using this environment strictly as a phenomenological vocabulary, a way to describe the experience of divine absence. Within this space, reality continues to operate mechanically, even though all inhabitable meaning, purpose, and human communion have vanished. This state of meaning-depleted continuation describes the core mechanics of biblical exile. Procedural continuity persists despite the total collapse of sacred coherence. In biblical communion reality, physical spaces possess sacred presence, symbolic depths, and a capacity for true human dwelling. The theological backrooms represent the inversion of these axioms. Sacred presence becomes absence consciousness. Symbolic depth collapses into sterile repetition. Dwelling degrades into anti-home wandering. Biological survival remains possible, but participatory wholeness, the connection to meaning and orientation, is fractured. This is a lived psychological experience of ontological estrangement within fallen creation. This framework shifts our reading of ancient texts. It turns the biblical descriptions of wilderness and liminal space into precise categories for human consciousness. Standard academic readings often categorize the biblical wilderness, or midbar, as a geographic location used for punishment. The true marker of wilderness is tohu wa bohu, a formless chaos zone bridging the order of Eden and the Promised Land. This manifests as dry chaos and wet chaos, environments that strip away self-sufficiency. Noah's flood was aquatic chaos. The ark was a floating desert. Survival in either manifestation of chaos requires total dependence on a prior divine word, because every natural support system has failed. Noah on the water and Israel in the desert endured this forced dependence, a zone where creation is unmade and faith is tested. Biblical subjects enter this chaos zone through a specific mechanical trigger. Judicial abandonment occurs when a covenant breach causes the withdrawal of divine protection. When this protective presence is suddenly withdrawn, the very spiritual floor of reality is shattered, dropping the subjects into an endless void below. In Joshua chapter 7, the soldier Achan hides stolen items under his tent, creating a systemic glitch. This single point of corruption triggered the withdrawal of divine covering over the entire Israelite army. During the Battle of Ai, the space itself rejected Israel's strategy. Their hearts melted, a state of liminal paralysis, because they had entered a region where the laws of victory were reversed. Joshua's army no-clipped into a liminal space governed by the rules of divine withdrawal. This exilic state manifests within human relationships with the same sterile intensity. In 2 Samuel chapter 14, King David allows his son Absalom to return to Jerusalem, but decrees that the son must not see his father's face. Absalom remains physically present in his home city, while subjected to total entity erasure by his father. For 2 years, Absalom functions in society. He walks the streets, but he is devoid of the only recognition that grounds his reality. He sets fire to a commander's wheat field, destroying the real world to force a collision with a reality that refuses to acknowledge him. When the authority grounding your existence refuses to recognize you, you inhabit an invisible psychological backroom, even in a crowded city. We can identify the internal experience of judicial abandonment through specific markers. The first marker is false familiarity. The environment imitates human dwelling, while offering no true rest or hospitality. Subjects also experience a loss of narrative. Time becomes cyclical. There is no climax, no teleology, and no destination, just continuation. This is accompanied by an unseen threat, an ambient, low-grade dread rather than a visible danger. These markers characterize the cyclical exhaustion of Ecclesiastes and the administrative bureaucracy of the Babylonian Empire. Modern procedural civilization, with its algorithmic scrolling, repetitive fluorescent offices, and bureaucratic forms, produces this exact low-grade exile consciousness. Biblical judgment often arrives as emotionally flattened mundanity and endlessly ordinary emptiness. Escaping this liminal terror requires a structural intervention. The biblical temple system functioned as a liminal override. The temple functions as a controlled environment where the chaotic, unmapped rules of the backroom are suspended. This architecture creates a localized coordinate where divine presence dwells within an exilic world. While the temple temporarily patches the glitch, it does not permanently rescue the subject from the condition of fallen creation. The temple proves that rescue from these liminal spaces is structurally possible, but it requires an authority greater than architecture to resolve the condition. Christ functions as the second Adam, possessing the authority to restore the participatory ground of reality. He deliberately entered the deepest levels of exilic consciousness, enduring the wilderness temptation and the relational abandonment of the cross. He descended into Hades, mastering the liminal space from the inside out. This mastery ends the state of judicial abandonment, restoring participatory communion to the subjects. This victory re-sacramentalizes the mundane. Ordinary reality, like the bread and wine of the Eucharist, becomes a vessel for meaning and divine presence. The final stage of this restoration is the New Jerusalem, a state of inhabited, glory-filled communion. The biblical narrative follows creation into a procedural void, only to document how it is rescued and restored to an eternal, inhabited presence.